afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the February 3rd meeting of the Temple City Council. If you please rise, invitation will be led by Danny Dunn and the Pledge of Allegiance by Thomas Jones.
Pray with me, please. Heavenly Father, thank you for giving us the freedom to meet here this evening, and please be with us as we make decisions to make this a better and safer community. Please be with those in harm's way and keep all of those that need it warm this evening. In your heavenly name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item on the agenda is an opportunity for public comments. Citizens who desire to address the council on any matter may sign up to do so prior to the meeting. Public comments are accepted during this portion. They're limited to 3 minutes. No discussion or final action is taken by the council, but we have no one that's signed up to speak to make public comment this evening, so we'll move on to a special proclamation that we have for National School Counseling Week. And tonight we have with us from the Temple Independent School District, Counselor Mr. Thomas Jones.
Sir.
All right, please come forward and let's...
Can I bring my group?
Absolutely. I hope you will. And I'll let you introduce them, and in fact, you can introduce them first, if you'd like to come forward. Well, I think I recognize at least one of them.
Oh, yes.
Thomas, who we have with us tonight?
We are privileged to have some fine servants who serve in the school district with Karen and Giving Heart. We have Brenda Parker, Susan Luck, and Salmon Bridges.
Welcome. Thanks very much for being with us, and thanks for all you do for our kids. Thank you. Thanks. It's my privilege to present this proclamation to all of you this evening in recognition of the work that you do, and so from the Office of the Mayor of the City of Temple. Whereas school counselors are employed in public and private schools to help students reach their full potential. They are actively committed to helping students explore their abilities, strengths, interests, and talents as these traits relate to career awareness and development. Whereas school counselors help parents focus on ways to further the educational, personal, and social growth of their children, and they work with teachers and other educators to help students explore their potential and set realistic goals for themselves. Whereas school counselors seek to identify and utilize community resources that can enhance and complement comprehensive school counseling programs and help students become productive members of society. And whereas comprehensive development school counseling programs are considered an integral part of the educational process that enables all students to achieve success in school. Now therefore I, William A. Jones III, Mayor of the City of Temple, Texas, do hereby proclaim January 31st through February 6th of 2011 as National School Counseling Week in the City of Temple, Texas. And I encourage all citizens to recognize the invaluable role that school counselors play in the field of education as they seek to help students reach their full potential in educational, personal, and social growth. In testimony whereof I witness my hand in the seal of the City of Temple, Texas, on this, the 3rd day of February of 2011. Thomas, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to recognize you and those that you work with, those that do so much for our kids.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Being willing to.
Thank you all
Council.
for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks. Next item is a special report received the City of Temple Comprehensive Annual Financial Report for fiscal year ended September 30th of 2010. Ms. Bernard.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. According to the city charter of the City of Temple, an annual independent audit is required to be made of the financial records of the City of Temple by a certified public accountant selected by the City Council. The City of Temple engaged the firm of Brockway, Gershbach, Franklin, and Niemeyer, P.C. to conduct this annual audit. And tonight, Steve Niemeyer, a partner in the firm, will present the annual audit report and be available to ask any questions. Thank you.
Thanks,
Steve?
Welcome. Good evening.
Thank you. Honorable Mayor and City Council, it's a privilege to present our annual comprehensive annual financial report. We prepared a short presentation to recap the highlights of this 200-page financial document. The capture is used primarily for rating organizations to determine the strength of the city's financial condition, its management, and its finance department. The city's outstanding bond ratings are evidence that the Temple is financially strong, is well managed, and has achieved excellence in financial reporting. As we review the 2010 financial data, we will see the financial challenges of an expanding infrastructure to meet the demands of growing business, such as Gulf States Toyota and the HEB distribution center during an economic downturn in which revenues have remained relatively flat. We will also see how Temple, its management, and its staff have met these challenges. The first financial data we're going to examine is on page 2. As you turn to this first graph, please remember that all financial data we're going to examine reflects the governmental and business type activities of the city combined. The top line of this graph shows the total revenues of the city. The revenue slowed during 2009 and remained relatively flat in 2010. The turquoise blue component of the graph represents the total expenses of the city. The sharp turn in expenses in 2009 represents the clear evidence of management's directive and efforts to cut costs. The flattening of expenses in 2009-2010 include, among other things, the hiring freeze for both years and no compensation increases in 2010 for general government employees. The only increases were step increases for civil service employees. As a result of curtailing expenses, the city has an excess of revenues in each one of these years that's presented. The cumulative excess for these 6 years is $37 million. And of that $37 million, $30 million has been reinvested into improving and expanding the infrastructure of the city. As we turn to page 3, we can see the components of what make up the revenue. Total revenues increased by $1.9 million for 2010. If you exclude the $2.3 million increase in grant revenues, all other revenues total actually decreased. Over half of the city's revenues are derived from charges for some services, the largest being water and sewer. The water and sewer revenues declined in 2010 as water consumption dropped by 10% as a result of rainy summer months. Property tax increased 4.9%, primarily due to increased property values as the city's grown. The impact of the local economy is most evident in sales tax and franchise fees, which both declined slightly in 2010. Certainly, this is relatively an excellent result compared to other cities. Yet Temple continues to grow, and to find improvements with flat revenues remains a challenge. On page 4, you can see what makes up the components of expenses. As we examine total expenses, allow me to point out these expenses do not include capital improvements. As an example, the city received and spent a $2 million grant to expand the runway at the airport. As we saw in the previous page, the revenues includes that $2 million worth of grant revenue. But this schedule, since the improvements to the runway has actually been capitalized, we won't see the expenses here in this schedule. Having said that, total expenses increased by $1.4 million in 2010. This increase, $1.6 million, was in the water and sewer services. So excluding water and sewer, all other expenses actually declined for the year. The primary component of the increase in water and sewer expenses was an increase in interest expense. It's another cost of expanding infrastructure, is the cost of debt. On page 5, we can see the increase in investment in capital assets. Here you can see what the results are of trying to expand our infrastructure. The top line of this graph represents total assets capital assets of the city, less accumulated depreciation. Most notably is the sharp increase in the assets during the last 2 years. During the same time period, revenues have been flat. The dark green component represents the city's equity in these assets, and you can see it's steadily increased over those 6 years. The yellow component represents unspent balance of bond proceeds. The $41 million balance of unspent bond proceeds is evidence of the level of ongoing capital projects. On page 6, we will examine the components of net assets for the city, or another way of saying that would be the city's equity. The largest component of the city's net assets is the yellow and represents the city's investment in capital assets. The blue component is the funds set aside for debt service. As the debt is climbed to meet the needs for infrastructure, so is the debt requirements. The dark green component is the city's unrestricted net assets. While the unrestricted net assets have grown, the balance has remained relatively flat since 2008. The last two graphs we're going to look at on page 7 and 8 depict the obligations of the city's two retirement plans against the assets that are set aside to meet those obligations. On page 7, we see the value of the fireman's retirement fund has climbed consistently to meet the obligations of future retirement benefits. This plan at the end of the year was actually 77% funded. On page 8, you see two changes that stand out for the TMRS plan. In 2008, the actuaries reevaluated the obligations of the plan to include the cost of living increases that are built into the plan. So the increase in the top line in 2008 does not represent the increase in the plan or benefits, but rather it just simply means that the actuaries are correcting something they previously omitted. The second item to note is a significant increase in the assets in the plan since 2009. In 2010, plan assets increased 9.5%. The largest component of this increase was actually investment earnings, which was over 7%. As we turn to page 9, I will conclude the presentation with summarizing the results of the audit. We've seen the evidence of the city's strength in finances, in management and finances. As we examine the audit results, we will focus on the strength of the city's finance department. As you can see in the summary, we have issued an unqualified auditor's report on the CAPR. We found no significant material weaknesses in internal controls. We found the city to be proactive in safeguarding its assets, and we found no questioned cause as we did city audit procedures. Most importantly, is we commend the Finance Department on their efforts to produce a comprehensive annual financial report. For 29 consecutive years, Temple has received a certificate of achievement in excellence in financial reporting in producing this very document. While most of us will never know the time, knowledge, and commitment it takes to produce such a comprehensive document, I know. So take it from me. Your Finance Department excels. You can be proud of Stacy Bernard as she provides leadership to the department. You can be proud of Melissa Perkowski for lead in producing this document, and to Stacy Weisner, Miranda Hennig, and Kyoko Ignano in their role in gathering data and helping assist the department producing the CAPR. Congratulations on the job well done. This concludes my report, and if there's anyone who has any questions, I'll be glad to entertain those at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Niemeyer. Appreciate that. Council, questions for Mr. Niemeyer or for Ms. Bernard? Thank you very much for your work in helping our city put this together.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Before we move on to the next item, I'd again like to echo Steve's recognition and accolades for Tracy, her department, Melissa, Stacy, Miranda, and Kyoto for a great job. Appreciate that. But that's for the financial accounting and reporting and putting this document together. But you do not do that yourselves. There are probably about 700 other employees in the city of Temple that make this document happen. Under the leadership of city manager, department heads, and employees throughout the city. That's really where it happens, every single day, out in the field, working with our citizens, doing things that we take for granted every single day, whether it's police, fire, water, airport, library, parks, just throughout the city, animal control. It is roughly 700 employees in the city of Temple that make this document happen, and to be able to give this kind of report. Not to make light of the work that any of you do in putting it together. You report the activities that they do every day. It's those plans, but those throughout the city are really what makes this a success. And thanks to all of them, everybody. The last couple of years have been very difficult for us as a community. We've put a lot in place. There are a lot of assets that we've employed over the last 8 years that I'm aware of, almost 9 years now, that we've done to prepare the city for the coming decades. And then to go through these last couple of years have been a real trial. We've asked a lot, and it's been given and beyond. So thanks to everyone for all they've done to make this possible, and congratulations to the staff for a fantastic report. We are strong. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. All items listed under this section, consent, are considered to be routine by the City Council and may be enacted by one motion. If discussion is desired by the council, an item may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any council member, and it will be considered separately. This is item 5, A through O this evening. Council items that you wish to be removed from consent for individual consideration or presentation. Item G, very good. Any other items? Item K, I don't think we're moving, but do we have a representative here from Encore? Okay, great. Thank you very much for being here this evening. I appreciate you being present to address this. I think we're going to leave this on consent, and it appears like we'll just handle this as a consent agenda item. But thank you very much.
Mayor, I'm told we have a replacement for John Green shortly, so.
All right, sir. All right, very good. Great. Well, we missed John already, and he did a great job for our community and for Encore, and he was a good friend and did much for us in his professional capacity, but also as a citizen of our community. So we miss John and wish him the best, so thank you. All right, this is item 5A through O, with the exception of item G. Is there a motion that you wish to make on this item, Council? Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion is second for approval of item 5A through O, less item 5G. No further discussion, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Dunn?
Aye.
Councilmember Jensen?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Lehman?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Item 5G is a second reading. Consider adopting an ordinance authorizing a zoning change from multiple family zoning district classifications to Temple Medical and Educational District TMed zones being T4, T5E, T5C, SDT, SDH, SDV, and SDC on approximately 849 acres. Ms. Spear.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. At our last meeting, we held the first public hearing concerning the TMed zoning change. There were some concerns brought up at that meeting concerning the applicability of the residential standards to existing residential properties. So this is a brief presentation just concerning the residential properties in the TMed area and what we are proposing to amend concerning those thresholds. This map shows the locations of the majority of the residential properties in TMed. There are 168 homes in the area. 63 of those are in the Avenue M area. 60 homes are on 5th Street, and 42 homes are on 3rd Street. The remaining 3 homes are on 1st Street. This chart, while difficult to read, is the current applicability thresholds that is in the existing TMed district. And the next shows a visual of what we're proposing to remove with a future text amendment after we've had further discussion concerning the thresholds. So the review process, the general standards and use standards, those are the first 3 columns in the chart. Those are typical requirements for any zoning district or any building permit process. The next column has to do with private property landscaping, And this column is applicable and would make a bit of a difference to those existing residential homes. Private property landscaping has to do with the amount of landscaped area you have on your lot, and then requiring 2 trees per lot and 2 shrubs per 10 feet of front foundation facing the street. The next column has to do with public frontage standards, and public frontage is the space between back of curb and your property line. This generally includes a planting area and then the sidewalk. And in the public frontage standards, what would be required if the threshold is met is 1 street tree per 25 feet of frontage, 4 to 6 foot sidewalk, and the variable width planting bed. The majority of the homes in this area already have the sidewalk, so that would not apply. The next column on the slide show general planting criteria. This applies to all thresholds because it simply tells you how you plant the trees and what size shrubs and trees to plant, and the specific list to choose from. Architectural standards, however, would have a bit of an impact on some of the thresholds if they were to be met. Architectural standards has to do with the types of materials, the roof pitch, articulation, the vertical and the horizontal movement on the facade of the home, transparency, which is essentially the windows and doors on the front face of the home, window trim requirements, window articulation, and entry features. The next few slides show samples of the applicability and how they would work in the district if approved. The first sample would be an existing home that would increase in size 10 to 24% or increase in value 10 to 24% based on the proposed work being done. They would be required to plant 2 trees per lot and 2 shrubs per 10 foot of front foundation. If they already have the existing shrubs and the existing trees that would be required, they would not have to require additional landscaping. This is the sample home in the TMED area that we're discussing. If they were to add on 10 to 24%, they would essentially be looking at adding 2 trees and 8 shrubs. However, this specific site does already have trees, so the trees would not apply. The next sample is the same home with a 25 to 49% increase in size. They would have to do the same requirements we just discussed, but in addition, they would be required to plant 1 street tree for 25 feet of frontage. So the same home, 4 trees at this point. The final sample has to do with a 50% or more increase in size or value. They would have to do the 2 requirements that we just discussed, and in addition, they would have to construct the sidewalk if it's missing. Essentially, the only places the sidewalk are missing are on vacant lots, but there are a few holes here and there in the district. But this would only apply for a 50% increase in size or value. The house would also have some architectural design standards applied to them. So the same house, vertical articulation is met with the change in height. Horizontal articulation is met with the projection of the porch. Transparency percentage is met with the doors and the number of windows. The entry feature requirement is met because it has a covered entry already. The material mix is not met, and so therefore they would have to add additional materials to the front facades of the home. And then the window treatments would have to be added as well, so they could add shutters to that 1 window. So they would end up with the trees, the shrubs, some alternative material, masonry, stone, stucco, and then a window shutter. This would be for a 50% increase in value or in size. Happy to answer any questions that you may have about the proposed applicability standards. These do vary greatly from what we currently have. We are anticipating, if this is approved, we will bring forth a text amendment making those changes to the TMED districts themselves in March and in April.
Could you go back 2 slides to the, yeah, there you go. In this photo, it kind of indicates that there's a brick or masonry addition for the 2 types of materials, so that you've got the siding or whatever on the house, the wood frame, and then masonry. Are there other materials that could be utilized there that would meet that requirement of 2 materials without having to go masonry?
Probably not with the wood siding that they have right now. The only other requirement would be some sort of masonry product or stucco.
So an aluminum-sided product, it wouldn't meet
No, sir.
that requirement?
It's not
Because
permitted in the district.
sorry?
It wouldn't be in the permitted requirements for material list.
Okay, so you're basically putting a masonry requirement in there.
And I think it's important to note that it's not percentage of size of the house. It's percentage of cost of the addition to the appraised value of that home. For instance, if that home was $60,000 home, 26% of that is $15,000, and in today's market, at $75 a square foot, you'd only have to add on 200 square foot, like a 10 by 20. So if you get in that category, you want to add a 10 by 20, you're more than likely going to have to plant some trees. If you go to the 50%, you're going to have to add some masonry. The other thing to note is that most all the houses, probably all the houses in that neighborhood are pier and beam, and to add a brick facade or a veneer to any of those structures is pretty costly. Not only, you just can't lay it on the ground and add a brick facade, there'll have to be foundations and footings and spread footings in front, and, it'd be a rather costly item. Again, I'm one that asked for some changes in the residential area of this district. I'm in favor of the district 100%, but it seems to me that if a house was reconstructed totally, then you could have some forethought as to what that house should look like, and the person that's doing this reconstruction would understand that if I'm buy this lot and tear this house down and reconstruct it, I may have some additional cost, or maybe not even additional cost at that point, but some additional design criteria to live by when I build this new structure. Or if you had a house that changed its use to commercial or retail or something of that nature, that you'd have the opportunity at that time to know, I'm changing this into a business, so there's going to be some cost associated with it. But I'm trying not to bear additional cost onto an owner that has purchased his house and has lived in it for 30, 40, 50 years, and now all of a sudden they want to add on a new washroom or whatever, that we impress upon them to add additional trees or shrubs, or in some cases stonework that has nothing to do with the additional living area, but it has everything to do with additional cost. I think, as you noted earlier in the workshop, there hasn't been that many additions in this neighborhood. So one way or the other, I don't believe that we're going to get a couple of extra trees because of the multitude of additions. And if there were one or two, I don't know that you would see one or two trees difference just for an add-on. This is strictly add-on. Reconstruction, I can understand, because you're getting something totally new, and you can start from scratch and do it right. I mean, if you put there's several engineers in the audience, if you put a brick veneer on that house, it probably wouldn't work unless you have some major construction. So I couldn't vote favorably on this entire TMED just because of that issue. If it removed the residential add-on from that, I could understand. Reconstruction and change of business, I think we do need to change the aesthetics of the property, but just for an add-on, I wouldn't be able to vote favorably for that.
Comments or questions? With, again, you can argue both sides of this one. There aren't that many homes over 25 years. I think, Mr. You stated in workshop, 13 homes over the last 25 years have had a permitted change.
Additions, yes.
Additions that would be within this TMED area that we're discussing tonight for residential areas that's included in the zoning change. So you can argue it's not going to have that big an impact, or you can argue it's not going to have that big an impact. So at which point, if there are some structural and financial issues related to the two materials requirement, you and Ms. Faust have done work over the last year relative to what is the impact that we would benefit from by adding the masonry requirement.
More than anything, it's a freshening up of the facade of the home. You could do an addition on the back that no one would reap the benefit of, and if you don't do anything to the front, then no one's going to know that you've spent $20,000 or $30,000. And so adding that masonry to the home, or you could even propose different, I'm thinking as you asked the original question, different directions of siding perhaps, a wainscot approach with horizontal lap siding and then vertical siding. You could do some different things, but the idea is that you would freshen up the front facade with your investment in the home.
And you selected a home that met all the requirements except for the one. And I don't know, looking at the homes, is that pretty representative? Almost all of them have a split roof or a
It does
covered
appear to
porch.
be. Most of them would be within the realm because they're not specific articulation requirements. It's just some general movement and some general things, so they would be pretty.
The vast majority of them that got into the 50% category would more than likely be the dual materials,
Right.
thus AKA masonry, as we've got it currently stated. So,
And that would be my point exactly, is most of them meet the requirement on the early stages, but if it's 50% cost of that, and then you're going to put masonry, that's going to jack, it's probably going to cost you as much to put, not as much, but twice as much to do it now than it would be to do it if you reconstruct the house from scratch, so.
I actually, that brings up an interesting point. There, along some of these roads, there's some very nice Austin stone houses. What would happen there? Because I don't see, even if they were to add on, I don't see going in and adding brick or adding brick plank to it.
No, you wouldn't do that. And I think in that case, you would look at the trim materials and the stone as a mixture. You're going to have some discretion with anything that exists in a new set of standards. But that's how we look at it. There are two that I can recall, fairly nice ranch-style homes that are 100% masonry right now. And so you wouldn't add that on.
So basically, you're just going to add masonry if it's a wood structure.
Right.
That's what you're going to ask.
And if that's the one requirement that needs to go away, we can tweak that as well. If you're comfortable with the articulation and the other design standards, but the material mix is the most difficult, that's something we can definitely bring back as well.
yeah, and the landscaping is one that you've indicated a majority, whatever that is, already meet it, because it's not a requirement that they add.
Right.
It's a requirement that they have at least so many shrubs per 10 feet, so many trees in their yard, to include the ones that might be in the back. It doesn't mean they have to have trees in the front if they have the required trees already in the
The
back.
trees would count if they're in the back. The shrubs would only count in the front.
Okay, so, and again, 13 homes out of 25 years, and the practicality of again, these generally 30 to 50-year-old homes being added to, so how much are we talking about here to cause an issue one way or the other? Like I said, you can argue the point that it doesn't matter or it doesn't matter. And so, but overall, it makes a difference of what we're trying to do within TMED.
Correct.
And that's really the major point, is we're trying to make this area of our city step up, improve what amounts to property values, to protect property values and enhance the community, and it's a long-term evolution that's going to occur in TMED. It's not anything that's going to happen overnight by the adoption of this rule. It's the beginning of a process that, there's a vision that we hope to achieve and there's still some more action to take as it relates to two other parts of the TMED area, but this is the bulk of the non-residential area that we're addressing here this evening.
Correct.
And I think you'll still have that opportunity if the houses are reconstructed or they change their use.
Yeah.
I think you'll still have it. I'm not totally against, instituting any guidelines, but I just think remodels, I don't see that to be necessary. So it's a small tidbit, still. I'm on the side that doesn't really matter.
I'm on the other side of it. and how wide's that line? So,
Can I ask another question?
sure.
Ms. Spear, going back to, how you said you could be a little bit more flexible with the facade part of it. How do you think you would do that?
I will just put in a provision for existing structures and the architectural standards in TMED. Just be an exemption, or we could go as far as you all like. It could be an exemption if you're 100% masonry now, the two materials are not required, or you could just exempt existing structures from the material mix in the architectural standards.
Okay.
So either way.
So that would mean we just,
Or you just say anybody that renovates and increases value by 50% or square footage by 50% have to have X percentage of masonry on the facility.
I could keep it that way too.
Yeah, I mean, so if they're 100% masonry, they already meet the requirement.
Right.
So it's a masonry requirement, is essentially what it amounts to, if you get in the 50% area.
so if you take the masonry away, we just say if you add on, you can plant some trees. That's basically what you're saying.
If that's what you say.
The other architectural standards would still apply, though.
Yeah.
So if you didn't have those, if you didn't meet them, you would still make those apply for the 50% or more.
The transparency, the covered
Yes, sir.
walkway, the articulation in the front.
An example of this particular house, that window that's on, that shows the shutters, a lot of homes in here, they boarded up their porches and things like that on this area. They would have to undo that because they wouldn't meet the transparency requirement. So, just something to contemplate.
That's why I asked the question earlier about, okay, is this representative?
It's representative of a lot, but there are a lot of homes that it's not representative of, that have been probably unpermitted additions over the years.
Do we want to change or do we not want to change?
Well, change, but not that much.
Mayor, can I, Mr. Black, offer a couple of comments? Can you go back, maybe the second or third slide, where you had your table? And I really just kind of want to highlight or make sure I understand, or visually kind of look at what I think is Councilmember Schneider's proposal for single-family residential development type triggers against that slide. Sorry, thought it was just...
Permanent technical difficulty. This is the way it should be. This is the way the screen wants it.
I'm going to have a
It's
reverse.
stuck.
Have it this way or this way. Backspace.
Well, while we're looking on maybe getting to that point, and I think...
We did it. Okay.
Now you do.
Now we've escaped 20 times.
If you look, Council, in the materials that were passed out at the workshop, and I think, again, they were on the screen earlier, I think that table was. The document I'm referring to is this one. And if I understand, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, right now, the standards are across the board there in terms of what they are. And we've been talking some about some specific, the masonry requirement or whatever the requirements are. Those are kind of that's the columns that go down the sheet there. But the rows across there are the triggers. And again, correct me if I'm wrong. There it is up on the screen. If I understand correctly, the proposal, one proposal is to eliminate everything, those bottom four rows. Those need to go away. And that the triggers for residential redevelopment are only two, where there's a change in land use or
there is new construction. And the new construction is 100%. Not 50% or 25 or 10. It has to be 100%. And those are the two triggers. And again, from my, as you heard me say in the workshop, from my chair, my suggestion or my comments to council would be to, certainly from the staff standpoint, we respect council's guidance and direction on the item. What I would offer, though, is the process that got us to this point that involved Scott and White, VA, and Temple College, and the Bioscience District, and the Texas A&M Health Science Center, and Temple Independent School District, and residential property owners that were also involved in the process. And also thank staff for the work they've done to get us to this point, too. From my chair, if you eliminate those other triggers and only limit it to new construction and land use, what you have on the chart right now is probably takes a generation to see change occur. I think if you eliminate those triggers, it will take substantially longer than a generation to occur. I don't know how much longer, but I think it would be quite a bit longer. And I think from my chair, what I would suggest is the objective of and the desire of the stakeholders as well as the process that's brought this forward has been to create something that we don't have. And not to do that in necessarily a expedient manner. Certainly a generation is a long time. But to point towards something that is substantial and significant and different in this community. And I think these triggers help do that. They don't solve every issue or every question or every area that may come up, but they do represent a change in something different and unique. And again, in the process that I've been through, vital to the economic, continued economic viability of some of our key stakeholders in this community.
Well, I feel bad. And I'm almost to the point I'm at where if that went away, I couldn't support it. Because I think, for the reasons you stated, Mr. Blackburn, we're trying to affect a change. At a minimum, the landscaping, I think, is significant. It makes a statement. Now, you can argue again that, those homes in there that don't have landscaping, they're not going to add on to the house either. And so there's nothing that's going to trigger any additional landscaping on those homes, with the exception of someday when it requires new construction or there's a land use change. That's the only time those are going to be impacted. So once again, there's some things that aren't going to ever change in that area until this generational change occurs, because that house, which is 30 to 50 years old, becomes 70 and 80 and 90 years old, and those aren't 100-year-old homes. It's not a historic district type of area. So
you head on to the back of the house, so you randomly go plant 2 trees in the front, and you randomly plant 2 trees in between the sidewalk and the curb. The tree grows for 5 years. Well, you've limited what you can, if you want to put a new business there, you have limited what you can build on that lot without taking that tree out. Because you have no idea where, new driveway or whatever, But when you reconstruct a new business or whatever, now you can place those trees where they need to be in relation to the new construction, to the new driveways, and all the stuff like that. So I would assume that you'll end up taking some of the trees that you plant out, which is,
Right, but who's going to add 50% onto their home and not stay there?
13 people.
And not stay there.
Let me help you with that one just a little bit. New businesses require alley access, so there's no new driveways, and they're not coming through the pedestrian, where you just planted those street trees, they can't come through there.
A new home.
A new home requires alley access, too. So that's part of the TMED
So
idea.
you won't be able to move the trees in the front, but if they're in the front yard planted somewhere, you've limited it.
Right.
So I'm half right or half.
If they do something, the trees may go. And then they'll have to plant new trees.
Exactly.
But if somebody's going to add 25, 50%, reconstruct their home, they're not doing it to be there 2 or 3 years, generally speaking, and then go away, and so they're going to get the longer-term benefit of those trees.
You also have the flip side of the coin. If you don't require any residential standards, and someone has a residential structure, they can add on 100% of their structure, and then the next year sell it to the commercial business who comes in and is just going to have to go in with code issues.
No, they'll have to plant the trees because it's going to change hands as a commercial business.
We don't have it.
Plant the trees and make the facade and...
We don't have a certificate of occupancy process right now that implements any changes to a structure in that manner, other than to make sure you meet health and safety codes. So I don't have anything in place that's going to make that happen.
I understand, but in this ordinance, I was asking to have that in addition to if it changes use or if it's constructed 100%.
Okay.
Wouldn't that get it?
We could do it. It's just going to require some more thought as to that, because that's going to be then you're going to have a bigger impact on taxing a taxable business that comes in. So it's
sense in arguing. I mean, everybody knows my point. It's a small little deal, and I'm 100% for the team bed. I mean, I don't want it to sound like this is a, it's just a small thing, and I don't believe it's going to make a difference one way or the other. But I think we're shoving something down a potential homeowner's throat that you're going to have to plant a couple more trees, maybe 4, and some bushes if you add on a couple 100 square feet. And I just don't think that's right. It's changing the rules after I purchased that house, and now I've got other requirements that I knew I wouldn't have. And if you go into it by reconstruction, you'll know that, or change it, you should know that. And it's just a simple little deal. So,
But I contend it's a rule that we're intentionally wanting to change.
sure.
And the only time it will be impacted, it'll be enforced, is if they make that change of a certain percentage and up.
Sure.
And again, is it that many homes that can likely change? And also, are there that many homes without landscaping to begin with that they wouldn't already meet the requirements? So how small a percentage are we arguing about? How small a number? And it can go either way. And you can say, yeah, so see, don't put it in there. And I say, so see, it doesn't have that big of an impact, put it in there.
So
It's not a wide line. It just, does this, again, what compels us to have to do this tonight? And can we look at this a little bit longer, explore this, say, is there any reason we need to take this action this evening and make sure that we've got this?
We can certainly explore it further. However, we do have some active development requests, and until we approve this, we cannot apply the new standards. So someone can come in right now and work under the old standards for
2 more weeks?
It's possible.
Yeah. Well, I know.
And Mayor, she has been over backwards between the last meeting and this meeting. I think she's done a great job as a compromise. But again, it's just a small thing, and I don't know what you could change. It doesn't feel. I hadn't heard from everyone on the council as far as how they feel, but it's my assumption that they're erring on the side of like it is, except for me. And so it's fine. I would hate to drag it any longer, so to speak, because she spent a lot of time and effort thus far to get it here, and so anyway.
Well, I don't think that silence is to indicate one way or the other at this point. Further discussion? I don't know that there's any substantive change at this point to require. I don't think we need to have a public hearing. Council, your pleasure.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve the item as presented. Is there a second? There being no second, the motion dies. Is there another motion that we wish to make at this time?
I would make the motion that we accept it as is, with the exception of the residential, that if the home was reconstructed those items, those checks would stay there. Or if the home changed use from residential to any other use, that all requirements would fall into place as well. Does that make sense? Is that? Basically taking off the 50%, 25% off the chart. 1, 2, 3, off the chart. Leaving the new construction on the chart. And all the check marks across the columns will remain. And adding, if you have to add, if the structure changes from residential use to any other use, that all the items would apply as well.
Let me ask a point of clarification, if I can, on that. Again, is it as simple as taking the bottom rows away, or is it just landscaping and masonry and some of these other things we really want to leave in place that might not already be part of the process?
Can I add just a point of clarification?
You bet.
The second reading tonight is just for the rezoning. We're not actually changing that chart tonight. I cannot change that chart tonight. You could, if you so wished, approve the rezoning, and then we come back, and when we get ready to look at this applicability chart, we can have much more discussion and different options.
So anybody that's applying right now, it's not going to affect them anyways?
If they apply right now, technically with the residential addition, the way the chart is now, it would kick in.
So why can't I change that by motion?
But we could make,
Because this is your recommendation,
right.
right?
The recommendation is that you approve the T-Med rezone, and that staff come back with a text amendment to address the residential applicability table.
Let me ask a question also, because I may be a little confused too. The proposed residential applicability chart is embedded within the existing ordinance that's on the table tonight. It is not.
No, it's not. It's already been approved. We approved that in December. We did this in a two-step process. We created the district, and then now we're rezoning the property to the district that we've already created. So in order to go back and change the table, I have to amend the unified
table's not on the
development.
agenda for action, is what
So-
you're saying.
It's direction that you're...
Talk about it now.
Then she's saying,
it all.
because of the concern you've expressed with the impact of the zoning changes on residential, she's saying a way to address some of those is to go back and revisit this action you took earlier.
So basically, you're saying that we would call time out and change the residential applicability chart, then come back and zone it, and everything would be fine?
No. The idea was that you all would approve the zoning, and then you would give staff direction on how you wanted that applicability chart to
So if we
work.
adopt the zoning, this goes into effect, everything that we've talked about that
direction-
Schneider says he doesn't want. So if he doesn't want that to go into effect, then we don't change the zoning.
But you all can give me direction, and in the interim, before March, that's the way we will proceed with that. But if you give me direction for that,
We don't want the zoning to take effect until we've done this, even if we're basically conditionally approving the rezoning then, at that point, because otherwise, this goes into effect, because it's already into effect, for the T-Med district, once we rezone it. So if Mr. Schneider doesn't want this, he doesn't want the
right.
zoning done.
The idea was that it would be a unanimous decision and direction. And so where we are now is that it's not.
Modify this tonight.
And if you can't give me a solid direction for this residential applicability table, then we need to probably table
Then
it.
I guess my motion would be the table then until that chart. But if she brings the chart back and everybody says, no, I want it back the other direction, then we're...
Well, you'd bring back both items for final action.
Okay.
But the ramifications of that, I can't bring the chart back to you all till April. And that's a long time to...
Why?
Because I have to take it through the public hearing process.
It's got to go through
It's got to go through P&Z and notification, and
But this didn't go through P&Z.
it did, yes, sir. All this has gone through P&Z.
But you changed that from last meeting to this meeting.
But I
2
didn't,
weeks.
I haven't changed it. I am asking for your direction to change it.
We didn't have that last time.
You have always had residential applicability in the TMED district.
Not broke out like that.
Yes, sir. It's in the
It's exactly like that?
It's in one chart, single family and commercials together.
You told us in the workshop that you went back from last meeting to this meeting, and you took some
I
requirements
did
off.
this.
So that's 2 weeks. From
Right.
last meeting to this meeting. So why not from this meeting to 2 weeks meeting, could you not change that chart back?
I don't have time to do the public hearing notification. I have to take it to a P&Z meeting. I haven't actually changed it other than physically, so you can see what we can do with it. It isn't in effect at all.
So let me ask, is the pending applications commercial or the residential pending applications that would be?
Residential.
Yeah,
But they're already in. But I
They're
have,
grandfathered already anyway, so...
but we have a pending commercial discussion, and so anybody else that can.
So the residential ones are already in, and they're under the old guidelines, basically. So, or under these
No.
guidelines. Okay, they're under the old guidelines.
That would be under the old ones.
So they're under the old
They're under the
guidelines, so
old-
we're not impacting them regardless of the action
No,
we take
you
or don't
wouldn't
take
be able
tonight.
to impact
It's
them.
commercial that if we don't approve the zoning, that leaves that wide open.
Yes.
That we would really like to close that gate.
Yes.
And we're really not impacting, so if we go back with, again, the understanding that we're going to do this, and if
Right.
we're going to do it, then that means you guys are going to bring this back, we're going to go through the process and make that
But
change.
part of the ordinance right now for residential, there's going to be a time frame between, if we said yes tonight, and when we change it back to something different, that it's going to go under the stricter guidelines in that right there.
That's what is going to be on the books, and then what staff will do
For the
is...
next couple of few
Right,
months, and we're
right.
gonna tell them.
The idea was that we would have council direction and policy from management, how to move forward with it.
That's there.
See, not when we're discussing this chart and the change of this chart is not, from what I'm understanding, is that's not what that chart's going to be. We're going to have to come back in 2 months or in April or somewhere and actually adopt what we're talking about. Because if we said yes tonight, we're saying yes to the residential requirements that you had 2 weeks ago.
I have another question for council. Would it be possible to carve out the 165 homes that we're talking about and then approve the zoning for the remainder of TMED? And then we could do that at a second public hearing? That might be an option?
Yeah, Jonathan, that question is for you.
Legal.
We can reduce the area, of course.
That might be an option that would give us the benefit of...
Frankly, the idea of, can you make it go back to the red here? Sorry, we're going back and forth. That's on the books. You approved that some time ago. And I'm not crazy about the idea of that we would go ahead and approve the zoning and just at a staff level not apply that, because that's the law. So,
We would be applying what was 2 weeks ago that had to do with residential, not this revised chart.
well, the
This is what's, no, the red is not applying. This is what applies right now.
that is.
Yes,
Okay.
the red proposes to remove those checks
Okay.
at a future text amendment.
Okay. So
that was...
To answer your question, I mean, if you could always do less than what you've given notice for. So you've given notice to change the zoning for everything, including those residential. You could carve the residential out tonight, and give the staff a chance to deal with that, bring that part back.
So in other words, go back to your map, back one slide. That's what you would carve, would be
The red areas.
that red area out.
Yes, sir.
But you're not...
If it was a residence in that red area.
Are you talking...
Or does that represent all the residents?
Because, I wonder if we need to just take a short break here. Either think we need to talk a little bit, because if I'm understanding this right, you're not approving zoning for that area. You've got residential uses in there, right? The zoning is, it's T, whatever that, what is the zoning?
That's T4?
T4.
Yeah, so we would actually have to pull those parcels out and be able to identify them all tonight. Do we know what all those are?
I have all of their addresses.
Okay.
May I make another comment?
Please.
For several years, we have been in the process of this moment and the past couple of months. This, to me, is something that I have looked forward to seeing happen. And the stakeholders that have been involved and the community has had every possible ability to comment on this. I think in December, the city sent out, 525 letters to property owners, or somewhere around there.
Yes, sir.
We've had public meetings for residents, for people in businesses in the area. I think that we're looking at this, and we're getting bogged down about this, but I really think that this is something that we have all worked towards to get, that I think serves the greater good of the community, and it will sustain us for the next 30 years. And I don't know, that's why I didn't have a problem voting on it tonight and approving it, because I think that what we are trying to do is the best thing for the community in the way that it's written here.
Well, so again, do all this and just maybe carve out T4 tonight? And do everything else? Does that accomplish anything for us?
Well,
And if T4 is the issue?
or within those T4 areas, if she could identify all the properties that, the 63, the 60, and the 42 by address, you could do the remainder as T4 and just carve those out for us. I don't know if we have that.
I have that.
Okay.
My comments have to do with the 10 or 15 responses that we've got from the people that live there. It has nothing to do with the stakeholders. I think we're doing a lot for the stakeholders in all the comments and the stuff that's got us this far. I'm just trying to respond to the people that actually live there, that that we don't step on their toes if they want to add a washroom.
Well, and those are the 10 or 15 negative comments then those are the ones that we received in our packets.
That's who I'm referring to.
But a significant amount of those comments were relating it not into what they can or can't do at their home. Many of them, it was a matter of their taxes. And zoning change does not impact their taxes. And the fact that their taxes have increased over subsequent years is because the value of their property has either been adjusted to market or it's actually increased in property value because of sales in the area. So what we're doing tonight does not impact tax value, other than long-term, because we enhance the value of their property, which is what every homeowner wants. They want the value of their property to go up. And so thus, when it goes up, ultimately, if they get reappraised when the value of their property goes up, their taxes go up. And that doesn't have anything to do with whether they planted shrubs or not, or added masonry or not, or added onto their home or not. So those comments that were negative were because of past increase in tax value or potential future, which is an increase in their home value. And I'll bet if you went to those people, they did not say they don't want their value of their property to go up. They just don't want their taxes to go up. Unfortunately, you don't get both.
I understand.
So that, yeah, no, that was just, if that's the point, if that's where you've taken this, from those negative comments, then that's, I think there's a different message there, as opposed to not being able to do something with their home. If they do something with their home, their tax value is going up, period. And they got to recognize that when they add that onto their home. Yes, Council, what you want to do?
Well, since I can't make this initial motion, I'll need to withdraw that, I guess, the initial motion that I...
Yeah, I'd for like a second, too.
Well, I didn't understand it to begin with, but trying to create something I couldn't do.
So, I mean, do we want to carve out the residential area out of T4 and pass it to zoning? Because that's what...
Why don't you just carve out the 165 homes? They're in T4 and T5, so we'll just carve out the specific 165 homes, and I have the addresses of
I
all of
would
them.
say if we could
And we'll keep the rest.
maybe flash those up. Can we do that? On that, Alan? Just show the list.
Flash the addresses up?
Yeah, can we display those? Just so the council knows. That's, we really do know which one. That's good, so that clears it up.
This is these are the 3rd Street addresses?
Those are the addresses, okay. So that list, that would be the motion.
Okay.
Then the 5th Street addresses?
So I'm becoming confused now. I thought I knew what I was voting on when I walked in the chamber here, but now I'm less confident that I do. We are carving those residential addresses out
Of today's rezoning.
of today's
That's
rezoning.
some of the discussion, we haven't heard a motion yet.
Okay?
Because otherwise, the checkbox chart is already in effect. And as soon as we approve the zoning, it applies.
I'll make a motion to...
One more comment from staff.
One more additional item, please. If you make the motion, please make the motion so that you table the public hearing or the second reading on the additional 165 residential properties. Otherwise, we'll have to renotice and start over with that as well. So you can table the 165, the rezoning of the 165 residential properties, which Alan is so kindly showing you now, and then propose to rezone the rest of it. And then we can come back, and I won't have to start over with the rezoning process. I can I'll do the public hearing process for the residential applicability text amendment, and then we'll catch up to the residential rezoning when we do that.
So when we come back, we're going to do
We'll do them
the
both
chart
together.
and the
Yes.
rezoning of the residential at the same time.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, Counselor. Jonathan, you all right with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I'd like to make that motion. The entire TMed district that's flashed up there with the exception of the residential properties of which we got flashed, and that we table the rezoning of the residential properties that we got flashed. The zoning of that, we table that. How did I do?
I think
We can interpret the "we got flashed" part to be more specific.
The list of items.
Yeah.
yeah.
Second.
Motion is second. Do I dare ask for further discussion? There being none, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Dunn.
Aye.
Councilmember Jansen.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Linus. Aye. Councilmember Shiner.
Aye.
Mayor Jennings.
Aye. Like they say, making sausage and making laws is important.
Thank you all very much. This is why I bring the big books.
This makes you want to do a CUP, doesn't it? All Item 6, regular agenda. Second reading and the public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance authorizing the annexation of approximately 3,230.43 acres located in the city's western extraterritorial jurisdiction, including a portion of Lake Belton and the surrounding property. Mr. Mabry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First public hearing and first reading yesterday morning on this annexation, and this is our second public hearing and reading and a final action on the proposed annexation ordinance. The council adopted a resolution directing the staff to create a municipal service plan and public hearing schedule back in December. We did that and held the two public hearings that are required by state law on the municipal service plan in January of this year. The subject property is located just west of the existing city limits and is approximately 3,230 acres of land and water, and that's just under 5 square miles. There are no residents in this proposed annexation area. It includes a portion of Lake Belton and the surrounding property that the Army Corps of Engineers currently owns. The city would gain plating review authority or subdivision review authority for the non-federal land in the new ETJ area. There is no impact on this annexation, causes no impact on the Corps' activities or Fort Hood's property or operations. And with all annexations, the property would become zoned agricultural upon its annexation. This is a map of the proposed annexation area. The blue is Lake Belton. The green part is the property that the Corps of Engineers owns. The municipal service plan would have, again, no effect on any interlocal agreements that the city would have with Texas Parks and Wildlife or Bell County or the Army Corps of Engineers, Fort Hood, or any of the other entities that operate in the area. And the municipal service plan doesn't contain any proposal to extend water or sewer facilities or to build any new capital facilities for this area. The staff's recommendation for this annexation is to conduct a public hearing and to adopt the annexation ordinance as presented in the item description on the second reading. And I can answer any questions that the council might have on this case.
Thank you, Mr. Mabry. Council, any questions before we go to public hearing on this item? There being none, this item requires a public hearing, and I'll declare the public hearing open at this time. Anyone wishing to speak before the council on this item, please come forward and state your name and address for the record prior to making your comments. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council, your pleasure on the second reading.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion is second for approval of the ordinance authorizing the annexation. There's no further discussion, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Dunn.
Aye.
Councilmember Jameson.
Aye.
Mayor Councilmember. Aye. Councilmember Schneider.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Aye. First reading of a public hearing, consider adopting an ordinance authorizing a zoning change from agricultural district to single-family 1 district on approximately 47.36 acres of land situated in the George W. Lindsay Survey, abstract number 513, and the S.P. Terry Survey, abstract number 512, Bell County, Texas, located on the west side of Morgan's Point Road, south of Bondi Lane. Mr. Mabry.
Thank you, sir. The approved preliminary plat for this property shows about 47 acres with 77 lots. The lot area for those 77 lots are between .33 and .8 of an acre. The rezoning that we're talking about now is a condition of the prior preliminary plat approval, so the currently submitted final plat that follows up that preliminary plat cannot be approved until the council approves this rezoning. Should the council deny to be redrawn to comply with agricultural zoning, which is basically 1 acre minimum lot size, or the applicant would need to apply for a different type of rezoning, such as urban estate, and modify the plat accordingly. This is the subject property that you see outlined in yellow on the aerial. It is fronts on Morgan's Point Road, and then Eagle Landing Drive, which is part of the Eagle Oaks at the Lake subdivision, is just to the south as a point of reference. Here are some photos of the site for the proposed subdivision, as you can see, and in any direction it's vacant property. This is the future land use and character map for the area. The property that you see on the screen for the proposed development is designated estate residential and suburban commercial. The proposal doesn't exactly comply with the future land use and thoroughfare, or future land use and character map, in that the plan calls for suburban commercial along the front, along Morgan's Point Road, and there isn't any proposal to do that. The estate residential land use category, though the zoning district that's being applied for, single-family one, has a smaller lot size than what would normally be considered for estate residential. But we know from their preliminary plat that that has been approved that the lots are going to be larger, somewhere along the lines, as like I said before, of about 0.3 to 0.8 acres. So this is a larger lot subdivision. It's just that the zoning that is being requested is single-family one, because all size zoning that's one notch less dense and has larger lot sizes allowed. And this is, one element that you consider when making your decision. And although it doesn't comply with the future land use map, it is the staff does, and the Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval of the rezoning, as I'll get to in a moment. These are the standards for single-family one zoning: the 77,500 square foot minimum lot area, a minimum lot depth of 60 feet, and a minimum lot width of 60 feet, and a minimum lot depth of 100 feet. Again, the proposed lot areas, widths, and depths for the subdivision that's being proposed are larger than any of those minimums listed there. More along the lines, as far as the width goes, of about average of about 120-foot lot width, and about the same for the lot depth on average. The surrounding zoning for the property is shown on the screen. There are a couple of single-family zonings that are circled. These had that same future land use category of urban estate as the majority of this property has, but when that zoning was approved, they were approved anyway with the single-family one. So just another thing to consider when you make your decision, that other subdivisions in the area had the same future land use designation, but single-family one was approved for them. This is the water and sewer line situation for the subject property. There's a 6-inch and 8-inch domestic water line running along Morgan's Point Road, and then there's 12-inch and 8-inch sewer lines further to the south. There will be extensions of these facilities, and the subdivision will be mostly in the interior, served by 8-inch and 6-inch water lines. There's 8-inch water lines and 6-inch sewer lines. The thoroughfare plan designates Morgan's Point Road as a minor arterial, and the request complies with the thoroughfare plan. There are, as I said, public facilities to serve the site, or that are planned to be extended to the property. 31 notices were mailed in anticipation of the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing on this rezoning. Some residences that were notified were in the ETJ, and some were in the city. 20 were in the city. We received one in agreement and one in disagreement with the proposed rezoning, and those are shown with the A's and the D's on the map. On January 18th of this year, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted unanimously in accordance with the staff recommendation to approve this rezoning from agricultural to single-family one. And the staff recommended approval of the rezoning because although the request doesn't comply with the future land use and character map, two of the neighboring developments have been zoned single-family one, having the same land use designation. The approved preliminary plat complies with or exceeds the single-family one standards for lot size, width, and depth. The request complies with the thoroughfare plan, and there are public facilities in place or planning to be extended to the property. And at this point, I can answer any questions that the council may have on this rezoning case.
Ron, didn't you say that you can't plat this until it's rezoned?
Right, the final plat for it that would allow the plat to be recorded and for lots to be sold can't be officially signed off by staff and the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then, of course, filed with the county so that the lots could be sold off. That can't happen until the rezoning is approved by the council.
Wasn't this property platted before, an approved plat before? And so at that time, what was it rezoned prior to plating it before?
There's
lots on that final plat that you're under review now, what you were professing there, or?
the final plat complies completely with the preliminary plat.
Okay.
It proposes the 77 lots on the 40-some acres of land, and as I said, the proposed lot sizes for this are a lot larger than what is the bare minimum for single-family one, so that kind of contributed to the staff recommending approval for this.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? There being none, this is a first reading and a public hearing, and so I'll declare the public hearing open at this time. Anyone wishing to speak for the council on this item, please come forward and state your name and address for the record prior to making your comments. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council, your pleasure on the first reading.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion is second for approval of the first reading on the ordinance for the zoning change. There's no further discussion, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Day?
Aye.
Councilmember James?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Williams?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Item 8, a board appointment. Consider adopting a resolution appointing one member to the Planning and Zoning Commission to fill an unexpired term through September 1st of 2011. Council, is there a recommendation for this particular appointment?
Mayor, I'd like to nominate Greg Rhodes for the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Second. We have a motion and a second for the appointment of Greg Rhodes for this unexpired term through September 1st, 2011. Is there any further discussion? There being none, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Day?
Aye.
Councilmember James?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Williams?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes this evening's agenda. Thank you very much for your attendance, your participation. We are adjourned.